Hello, humans of the internet. It helps if you turn your mic on, Jax. Welcome to my very first Azurhia Under the Hood. Um, this is something I've had up my sleeve for a while now, which is the idea that. Okay, let's go all the way back. If you are brand new to this, I have created a TTRPG world called Azurhia. It is a planet, and it started out as a D&D game. She says as if that's simple. Nothing's ever simple. Hello, have you met me? So we started streaming basically really small. Like, the idea was that it would just be a series of one-shots, that there is this guild, and like an adventurers guild, and it was kind of a West Marchy sort of vibe, so anyone could join the guild, and then we did these one-shot adventures where they were given a mission, they went off and did the mission, came back from the mission. It was meant to be really simple, but if you know anything about me, you know that nothing I do ever stays simple. What happened was that my players got extremely invested in the worlds I was making, and so I had to make them internally consistent. I couldn't just wing it on the fly, and we ended up with a crazy experience where I had something like, I think at its max we had something like 50 players, and every player had a backstory, and the stories were all intertwined with each other, and we ended up having basically 24-hour online text RP happening in our Discord server. It got insane. So we played out that season. It took us about 2 years, I think, to get through the whole of that first sort of story, and it was I was constantly just slightly ahead of my players. Sometimes I wasn't ahead of my players. I was building the world under their feet as they were traveling through it. So for the second season, I put them into a homebrew world that I had made up for a home game. It, in a lot of ways, was already formed in my brain, and that has only become more true. I feel like there's a lot of this universe that just sits in my head and nobody has any idea of what's going on with it. So, and then Wizards of the Coast pulled some bullshit, and we decided that we didn't want to be doing D&D on a public forum anymore. I'm not going to lie to you, I still love 5e. It's still pretty much my favorite way of playing TTRPGs, but for our purposes, what we were doing, we wanted to move away from that. So we switched to Pathfinder. I had never played Pathfinder before, so I was learning it again, building the things underneath my players as we went along. Most of my players had never played Pathfinder before. We had a few who had, but it was a very, very steep learning curve. And over the course of that, I realized that the kind of thing I'm trying to do and the kind of stories I'm trying to tell don't work with Pathfinder, and they don't even really work with D&D. Like, it took me about 5 minutes to start homebrewing stuff. And I started building a new system in my brain. I don't think I even realized that was what I was doing right away. But I started thinking about what it is I really like in role-playing games as a DM, the things that I enjoy my players bringing to the table, the kind of gameplay that I enjoy interacting with as a DM. I always say if I wanted a story that was going to go the way I expected, I would write a novel, right? Then you're in charge of the story, in theory. Anyone who's a writer knows that sometimes your characters do what they want, but it meant that those quite rigid systems didn't work for the thing I wanted to do. I wanted a system that rewards risk-taking, rewards story-based decisions, rewards that thing where you take a shot at something. Or one of my favorite lines to hear out of a player's mouth is, "I have a crazy idea." I love it. Let's go. Let's try your crazy idea. Let's see where it takes us. Some of the worst in character decisions my players have made have led to some of the best story stuff. And so, and that's the case, right? Like, all good stories have terrible mistakes in them. That's where you get the real awesome nitty-gritty stuff of really good stories. And I love players that aren't scared to do that. I love players who dive in, who do the crazy thing, who try the insane plan, even when it doesn't work, or even when it causes trouble, because out of that trouble is where really interesting story comes. So that's the background. What it has led to is that I basically have started building my own TTRPG system. I'm going to be very real with you. It definitely borrows a lot from D&D, and it borrows some things from Pathfinder, but it veers away from those things in some fairly significant ways. It allows players, I hope, or it will, once it's finished, because that's the point of these little sessions, it will allow players to really get creative and to take control of their characters' stories. And it very much puts the character and the character's story at the center of the mechanical decision making. So the whole idea is that it's less about how do I max my stats, how do I make my attack super duper strong, how do I whatever, like that stuff. I know there are people who love to play that game, and that's cool. If that's your game, that's great. Like, go play that game. I'm not that keen on that game. It's just not interesting to me. I don't care what your stats are. I care how you use them. I don't care how many amazing special skills you have. I care how you combine those in interesting ways. Let's see something we haven't seen before. So I have the bones of this thing in my head. The point of these streams is essentially I'm using you, the audience, as a body double. The idea would be that I'm going to construct this thing right in front of you. I'm going to say right at the outset that things are probably going to change as I go, that I will probably make decisions and do things and then go back and go, wait, I don't think that's going to work, and rearrange it. What you are seeing here, if it interests you, is an insight into how my brain puts these things together and what that looks like. You will watch a lot of Excel spreadsheeting because I do a lot of my thinking in the form of Excel spreadsheets. But we're just going to kind of dive in and see where we end up. Part of this is also going to be world building. So if you are in my horde, which I'm guessing most of the people who end up watching this will be because they're the ones who are invested in the story, you will know that Azurhia is a complicated wee planet. I have a world anvil for it, which I guess I'll drop in the links. And at the moment, it's also very bare bones. I've been doing a lot of putting in placeholders, just throwing things in there for me to fill out later. I've tried to put as much of the existing canon from the Gallant Horde up to now into the world anvil, but there are a lot of missing spaces, so we're going to fill that in too. So there's going to be a little bit of build the system and a little bit of build the world. Today I kind of want to focus on the system stuff because I feel like I need to get some of that out of my head, and because I think it will give you an idea of where I'm going with this. Again, please understand that this is going to be very work in progress. There are some basic building blocks that I'm set on, but a lot of the stuff is going to evolve as we go. My idea is also that once I've got the basics of it and some idea of the character progression, I'm going to be inviting people to come and play test it with me. So we'll be pulling in people and getting them to create a character. We will live stream the character creation process. And then we'll play a few just test sessions just to see how it goes. And the idea of that would be, once we've play tested it, then we'll have a conversation about how it worked, what didn't work, and then tweak. And we're going to basically keep doing that until we get to a point where I feel like it's ready to go. And then once it's ready to go, we'll start a proper game. That was a big intro. So I guess let's jump in. The plan for these streams is that I'll be doing them twice a week, so Tuesday and Thursday mornings my time. It'll be a bit earlier than this one started because I had to figure some tech stuff out before I got going today. They will start at about 5 a.m. my time, which is about half an hour ago if you're watching this live, and go for about an hour and a half. And then I'm going to go to work and have a day job. So that's where we're at. Okay, so what I'm going to do right now is just show you my currently completely empty Excel spreadsheet. My plan here is to essentially begin to build the idea of a character sheet and what that's going to look like. So we're going to start with that and see how we go. So the thing we're starting with, before we even do anything else, I'm going to do a thing that is probably going to make a lot of you crazy and make it into squares. So I probably want, like, let's go with 5, and then we will make the rows 30. Does that give us squares? Yeah. Building blocks. I realize there are probably better ways to do this. I don't care. I like Excel. It works for me. So that's what we're doing. Okay. So we're going to start with, this is character name. If you're watching this, give me a name. If no one gives me a name, we will just call our character Bob. The temptation to write builder, I'm not going to. Bob the Elven Rogue. No, that's stupid. Bob the Sneaky. Okay, and then we're going to have, so we will still have class, but it's going to operate quite differently to what you may be used to. That's just how it is. We'll go with Rogue for now. This is really just placeholder, and I will eventually make this look pretty because you know me, I can't help myself. And then Ancestry. So I'm taking Ancestry from Pathfinder because, one, it's a much better word than race, D&D, seriously, but also because I feel like it really, in my worlds, racism isn't really a thing. Classism is a thing, but racism isn't really a thing, because I would like to live in a world where that doesn't exist, and what's the point of making fantasy worlds if you can't make them at least a little bit like the world you would like to live in? So I've gone with Ancestry because what that entails to me is essentially physical characteristics that you would have based on your genetic physical makeup. So different ancestries will have different lifespans. They will have different physical characteristics. So for example, if you are a cat person, you're probably quite good at climbing, right? Like that kind of stuff. What they will not have is personality characteristics, because that is some racist bullshit. None of this, all dwarfs are blah, all elves are blah. No, come on, don't be dumb. So we're going to make Bob a catfolk because, oh, that's so dumb, Jax. We'll make him an elf. Start with the straightforward stuff. Okay, and then we are still going to have the 6 basic stats, although there is a minor tweak, and I will get to that. So the physical stats are strength, constitution, and dexterity. Those are the same as basically every TTRPG you've probably ever played. Let's put those in the middle. If you don't know TTRPG, strength is what it says on the box. How muscly are you? Constitution is your how well do you deal with poison? Do you get hangovers? It has to do with your vitality, I guess. And dexterity obviously is how agile and are you. Now, here's where I veer away immediately in the first 6 stats with the non-physical statistics. So traditionally you have wisdom, intelligence, and charisma, right? Wisdom and intelligence have always struck me as being difficult because people don't seem to always grasp what that actually means. In both D&D and Pathfinder, it's the difference is something along the lines of intelligence is brain power, right? How smart you are, how analytical you are. It's very cerebral. Wisdom is more like intuition. So characters who are clerics, for example, and get all their mojo from a deity are often wisdom driven. That has to do with faith and intuition and that kind of thing. Druids, nature based classes are often like that. And yet nature is an intelligence stat because it has to do with how many things you know with your brain. So what I've done instead of intelligence wisdom is I'm going with reason and instinct. And then charisma is still charisma. So reason is literally how good are you at thinking your way out of the box? How good are you at using your brain to get you through whatever it is you need to do? So this would be a stat you use for things like, remember, I read this book once and I remember what I read in the book. Or I have this puzzle in front of me and I'm able to identify the way it is the way it works or how it's stuck together. Things like puzzle boxes would use reason. Instinct is intuition driven. So it's vibe checking would be instinct, right? Insight checks would be instinct. You meet someone, figuring out are they lying to me is like, that's a gut thing. So that's the distinction in my head and therefore in my world. Charisma obviously is the same as it has always been. Are you good at lying, persuading, convincing, etc.? That is what that will look like. I'm just opening this up. I'm not seeing it. Oh, it does say there's someone watching. Okay, cool. Hi. If someone is watching and you can drop something in chat so I can see if my chat thing is working, that would be super. I've never done this to YouTube before, so this is new and I don't know how it works. Anyway, that's where we're at. So those are our 6 base stats. This is obviously, I say obviously, you can probably figure this out, a D20 based system. So it is heavily based on 5e and a little bit of stuff that I've taken from Pathfinder and quite a lot of stuff that I have made up with my own brain. Which is all about, like, I see what I've done here. Oh, Jax, you're a silly Betty. There we go. Based on playing it for a long time and the particular stuff we do with the Horde, but also based on the kinds of role-playing I like to see. So that's the easy thing. Those are the same. I haven't really decided on how we're going to do this. I like the roll for everything approach. I think that probably it will be there is a part of me that is very tempted to make it roll from the top down because the base stats here are basically what you start with before anything else happens. So do you start, what are your base predispositions? Because it's interesting to me, the idea of someone who does not necessarily have a high strength stat to start with becoming a barbarian because they have encountered things that have made them angry and have made them want to get stronger, and so they've become stronger. But I'm still kind of noodling at that. I might leave that open for now, that it much like D&D or Pathfinder, you can either do the 66, take the top 3 thing, or points by it, or do a standard spread. For now, we're just going to leave it alone. I am also going to just go with the standard, for now anyway, D&D modifier system. So if you have an 18, it's +4. It is amazing that I explained this to someone recently who has been playing D&D for years, that the way you work out the modifier is you subtract 10 and divide by 2. And they were like, what? And I'm like, yep, that's the thing. So that's the easy part. This is where things get curly. Because instead of the standard gigantic long list of skills that you get in both these games, we are going to work with something that I have called expertise. So expertise, the idea of expertise is that it is the skills you have gathered over time. There will be some, I think, that come automatically with your class as you go through your class leveling. There may be some that come with ancestry, although I think far more likely we are still going to have backgrounds. Oh, wrong thing, background. Most of them will come from background. The reason being that, again, we'll make him an urchin. My idea is that you should be the things you have learned in your life should come from the story of your life, not from the skin you were born in. So that's a thing. I'm not going to get into the nitty-gritty of expertise, but the gist is that it will work much like the Pathfinder system of untrained, trained, expert, master, whatever that is. There is essentially a 5-part scale. Untrained, trained, master, expert, legend? I don't know. We can call it whatever we want because we're making it up. But 5-part scale. And there will be essentially over time you will buy expertise points that you can then spend to enhance your current skills or gain new ones. So to start with, you would have like maybe 5 max. So you would get like 1 class-based expertise skill, probably 2 class-based expertise skills. So for a rogue, these could be things like pickpocketing, or I guess stealth, or some form of stealth. The other thing I want to try to do is make them more specific. So you don't get expertise in nature, because nobody, even the most advanced zoologist, knows everything about nature. You get expertise in particular areas. So if you're particularly into mushrooms, for example, you may have expertise in fungus, or you may have expertise in the animals of a particular area, or expertise in a particular kind of, or the plants of a particular forest. Something along those lines, right? So it would be, what is your, where is your knowledge about this thing focused? So if you were a cleric, for example, you would not get expertise in religion, but you would get expertise in your specific deity's religion. Because let's face it, if you are worshipping a particular god, that does not mean you know everything there is to know about all the other gods. You might know more than your average person, but even then, there are going to be things that you're like, I don't know anything about that. That's not my area. So that makes more sense to me. So 2 class-based expertise, and then 3 others. And I've left this open on purpose, because what that means is that you are then beginning to build your skill set based on your character's backstory. So if your character has grown up on the streets of a particular city, they would have an expertise in the criminal underground of that particular city, for example. Or if your character is a member of a noble family, they would have expertise in the society movements of that family's Milo. I hope Lionel's not watching this so he doesn't mock my French. Something along those lines. So you basically start with 5 things that you know about. There will be a number of points that you can put into those 5 things, which will allow you to weight them. We'll say for now, for the purposes of the discussion, there are, let's go with 8. 8's a nice number. So basically you would have like 3 that are at the, let's go with 7. You have 5 in total, 5 that are trained, and then 2 more that you can nudge up to whatever the next thing is. something along those lines. I don't like untrained though, because I feel like untrained is maybe untrained. Maybe it's like novice. Maybe we throw out the Pathfinder things and call them like novice. I don't know. Anyway, there's a scale, and the first scale should be slightly better than your average person. Right? This is something. This is an interest of mine. This is something that I have put some effort into learning about, and I know some stuff. Like I know more than your random chap on the street. However, you're not a legend master because you're a level 1 character. This is the beginning of the story. So you shouldn't be spectacularly wonderful. You should be okay. And then 2 that you are trained in, and or whatever, level 2 in, which would be, I'm actually, these are things I'm pretty good at. You can then nominate 2 more. And what these are essentially intended, we'll call it an intended path for now. What that means is you, as part of your character creation process, you go, okay, my character knows about these things, and they're interested in these things. So what this is something that is driving your character to find out more about these things. It may be that the story takes you somewhere else, and if that happens, that's fine. But the idea is to give your character some kind of forward movement, right? So I'm a monk, and I know about 2 kinds of martial arts, for example, and I know about my particular monastic order, and I know about baking because my mum was a baker, and I know about, I don't know, birds because I was obsessed with birds for 5 years as a child. Apparently my monk has ADHD. Don't we all? These are the things that I already know, but I'm also interested in the work of Nangani, who is a god in my world, a deity in my world, because I have just watched an attack, a group of vampires attack someone I care about and kill them, because all backstories must have trauma apparently. And so I have become obsessed with destroying the undead, and Nangani as a deity that's one of his things, is he hates the undead, and his followers basically hunt them down. So my intended path has something to do with learning more about the undead, about vampires in particular, and Nangani as a potential patron or whatever. This gives your character somewhere to come from, but it also gives them somewhere to go to. Now, it may be that in the story, as the story progresses, your character encounters vampires who don't behave this way, or your character realizes that nothing is that simple, and Nangani's approach towards the undead is a little bit black and white, a little bit overly simplistic, and you may veer off that path, and that's fine. That's the point of a story, is it takes you places you don't necessarily expect, or your character may encounter things that change the way that nudge what their path looks like. But the idea of that nominating is not that you have those things, but that you are working towards them. So over the course of a game, you would build a bank of these expertise. Each level, you get a certain number. When you level up, you get a certain number of expertise points that you can then put into your existing ones to bump them higher, or put them into your nominated ones if it's something that you have learned about, or put it into something completely different. However, you have to justify it. And this is where it gets interesting. Because you can't tell me that you've suddenly become a master level, whatever, a level 3 person in Law of the Undead, if nothing in the story has led to that. You have encountered no undead. You have said nothing about studying them, or looking in books, or talking to people, or you just suddenly woke up one day and you knew the stuff. Nah, bro, that's not how this works. It has to be story driven. So if you want your character to learn more about a particular thing, or develop a particular skill, that has to be built into the story. That has to be, as a DM, I need to see your character doing that. And that's something you can work with, and I keep saying me, but realistically, once we've built this, anyone could DM it, right? That's the idea, is it's supposed to be something anyone can do. But the idea would be that the DM and the player work closely together to build the story in a way that allows the character, that gives the character space to do those things. That does not mean it's the DM's responsibility, but it means that it should be a communal thing. And if something happens to your character in the course of the story that makes them, that allows them to go, wait, actually, this is a thing I need to know more about for whatever reason, you can then bring that in at your leveling stage and go, okay, well, this thing happened. My character's now become interested or focused on this for whatever reason. This is something I want to pursue. And then you put that in the mix, right? The other thing I really want to build into this is the idea that you can learn from failure. So there would be essentially a number of ways to gain points. Okay, I feel like I'm going to take a few steps back here. So the expertise points, when you level up, you can use a certain number of them. So essentially you would have a points bank, and you're putting points into that bank as you play the game. When you level up, you can use up to a maximum of the points you have in your bank and distribute those into your skill set. Those points would also be, some of them will be specific to your class leveling process. Some of them will be 100% story driven. But the idea is that you can gain points by being spectacularly good at something. So you try something that is out of your current skill set's reach and succeed dramatically, nat 20s or very high rolls, or just very creative use of what you have to work with, because it's not always about the numbers. Sometimes it's about the way you're thinking. So that's one way. Another way is by catastrophic failure, because I think sometimes in life the best way to learn something is through catastrophic failure. So you're in a very high tense situation. There is a locked door in front of you. Your rogue is unconscious on the ground. You're just I don't know, you're a bard. Let's go. No, bards are dodgy, so we already know they can probably pick locks. You're I don't know, cleric. You've never picked a lock in your life, but you've seen your rogue friend do it a lot. So you pick up his lock picking tools and you give it a shot. And the DM says, I'm going to need you to roll a flat roll because you don't have this skill. So this is a straight D20. How's this going to go for you? Depending on where you are in the story and how bad the lock is, it may be that it is not possible for you to pick the lock on the door. That's fine. You roll, you nat 1. The pick breaks, the door is stuck, there's no way to unlock it now, everything is terrible, but you pull out your magical holy mace and you kill the bad guys and blah. This leads you then to go to your rogue friend who you have healed because you're a cleric and go, I need you to teach me how to do this thing. That's how you get an expertise point from catastrophic failure, because it instills in you the need to have this skill, or it puts you in a position where you learn something about yourself or about the skill that catalyzes that growth. Or you roll a nat 20 and somehow your hands just click, 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 and the door unlocks, right? Or you can feel how it would work, but it's just because instinct can only take you so far, and you can't do it because the DC is 25 and you can't roll a 25. But it's enough to make you go, this is a thing I feel like I have a knack for. So you would potentially get an expertise point for that particular thing. That means that when you then get to your leveling point, you go, okay, well, I have these things that have happened, these points that I have gathered over the course of the story. Now I'm going to choose which of these skills I actually want to focus on and put those into my skills list. I hope that makes sense. That's kind of where I'm at with this. It's a little bit amorphous at the moment, and a lot of it is going to be a conversation between player and DM, right? Because the player will then come to the DM and go, that thing that happened with the door, I feel like my character is now thinking about that and is wanting to learn how to do these things. And then the DM can go, okay, cool, you will need to actually have that conversation with your rogue friend and start learning it. And then you can just build that into your RP and away you go. And then that's how you get new stuff in there. I need to drink some water because my throat is getting all throaty. I think I will probably have similar things for the main stats, but maybe not. And the reason I say maybe not is because they are very general. And the whole point of the expertise system is to allow you to build, to really construct a character with very specific, with a specific set of skills that are driven by the character and by the story that that character is experiencing. Okay. So there's that. The classes. When I started doing this, I started building a leveling system that was very close to the Pathfinder leveling system. And as I started doing that, I realized that a lot of that is there's definitely a formula, right? So almost every class has a point at which their dex gets better, and their, you know, like 3 or 4 of the skills get better at some point. Perception is a big one. I think every class has a point at which in their class leveling process, their perception just increases, just boom, just like that. And I was like, well, if you're going to do that, if you're going to make things just go up for whatever reason, maybe we can do that in a more interesting way. So basically, what I wanted, I'm just going to duplicate this for a hot second. Copy. Mostly because I have set this up so that it's in dark mode, because Exile doesn't have dark mode, but my eyes go, if it's shiny at me. So essentially, what I want to do is build class skill trees. So what that means is that, why does trees not have a capital T? Is it would operate more like, I'm sure you've encountered this in games where you have a skill tree and you have to unlock things to unlock other things and so on. Basically, there would be lines of skills. So Bob's a rogue, so if we go with rogue, your basic skill, your sort of starting points would be things like pickpocketing, lockpicking, oh my goodness, Jax, lockpicking, things like stealth, the good old sneak attack. So you would have a series of, okay, those are stupid names, but you would have a series of basically class skills that are part of that leveling process, but they would basically stack and unlock as you went along. So there would be like level 1, and then, if you have pickpocketing, you can unlock, I don't know, pickpocketing 2. And that would involve having either, so in the case of the rogue, it would be things like, you get a modifier, a +1 modifier, whatever, if you try to do the thing. For someone like a fighter, it would be particular weaponry or particular fighting styles, and potentially particular like the swashbuckler has that tumble through thing in Pathfinder. So particular moves or actions that make sense in terms of the character. So there would be like skill lines for those things, but you would need, as you move through it, there would be prerequisites. So you would need to unlock things in order to move further down that line. What I want to do is that at intervals, probably the end of level 4, so before the 5, so level 4, 9, 14, and 19, there would be class-based, what's the word I want, like a challenge skill that would unlock specific things for your class that has to do with the subclass things. So the cleric is the best example of this. Your deity would expect certain actions or behaviors or trials or something that you would need to go through to unlock particular things for that deity. That may include particular like special skills, it may include particular spells, things along those lines. And it would be, for a cleric, for example, it may be something like a pilgrimage to a particular place, or like a religious trial of some kind that is specific to what that deity. So we were talking about Nangani earlier. Nangani has a real thing about undead. He seriously dislikes them. So potentially you would have to destroy an undead being of a particular level or of a particular power in order to unlock a bunch of Nangani stuff. If you are able to do that at that level, sweet. If you're not able to do it at that level, then you don't get to unlock that stuff until you can do it. So we're not talking about the whole leveling thing. It would be a very specific class of stuff, of skills that become available at a certain point. So at level 4 these become available, but in order to get them you have to essentially complete a side quest of some kind, which means that if you're doing a campaign style setting, you would have to convince the rest of your party to come along with you to do the thing. For a rogue, it would probably be something like so some of it is meta and some of it is built in. For a rogue, it would be a particular level of heist, for example, or access to specific organizations or something along those lines. That would obviously not be built in, or that would be a meta thing, right? So you as a player know that in order to unlock these things, you have to complete a particular kind of quest or a particular kind of mission. But your character isn't like, if I do this thing, I will then be able to do these other things. Whereas with a cleric or a paladin, basically anyone that has a otherworldly patron, so warlocks, even necromancers, anyone who has a relationship with a higher being, then it's real easy to build that in. It's real easy to be like, Kiefer says you have to do these things in order to, and you can have dreams about it and whatever. But the idea would be again that that you don't just get shit. You don't just get a bunch of skills. You have to actually earn them in the story. These things are not just randomly handed out to you. So I don't 100% know what this is going to look like yet. It's going to be some of it will be universal. So some things will be like, there will be tracks for things like those major skills, so like strength, which is just training, right? Like there would be like a doesn't like that. Okay. It's not actually a formula. It's just me telling you. We would have that potentially for each of the major stats, and then it would just build each time. But you would have to unlock it, and you would also have to, again, justify it in story. So if you tell me that you're taking the +1 strength thing, you also have to show me in the story that this person is training, that this person is doing the things they need to do in order to achieve that improvement. And again, much like the expertise, there would be a particular, at each level point, there would be a particular number of points or whatever that you can spend on these skill trees that would allow you to pick the path your character takes. So what this means is that you could, if you wanted to, do a very jack of all trades approach where you know how to do a lot of things okay, or you could take a very specialist approach and just push your way down a few particular lines of things that your character is very focused on. This allows for the kind of subclass things, so like the assassin rogue, there would be a whole assassin line where you can learn a bunch of assassin shit, and all that stuff would be in a particular sort of column on the tree, so you would work your way down that. Again, probably there are some things that are just going to get better, that you just get reasonably, like the improved sneak attack as you go along just makes sense. But a lot of it, I guess what I'm trying to do with this is make people a little bit more thoughtful about how they progress their character and what it looks like in the story. Like, how do you make this person, how do you justify this person having these improved skills? What are we doing that makes it make sense? But it allows for a much more open character building experience, I think. So over the next however long it takes, we will be building these out in a much more specific way. I'm just kind of trying to get an overview of what I have in mind here. The other thing, how much time have I got? 20 minutes. Can I do this in 20 minutes? I might just give you a quick overview. Is magic. So I lay awake the other night thinking about classes of magic and schools of magic and how I want that to work. And I think we need another sheet for this too, or we're gonna, so we'll just copy, create a copy, go. Delete these things. So, magic. I should give these real names. Let's go. Rename. Base. Character. Info. Rename. Skill trees. So ultimately what I would like to do. What are you doing, Jax? Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. This isn't right. Copy. Paste. I'll come back to you. So this one is going to be called skill trees. The idea would be that that essentially we would build out a whole set of that skill thing, which means that in theory, if you played the same character for a very, 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 very long time and you could justify it, and your character has an incredibly long lifespan, there's no reason why you couldn't like multi-class your way to being a super duper badass, because there's no real reason why you can't learn everything given enough time and enough motivation, right? Alright, this is magic. So the problem I have always had with magic in both D&D and Pathfinder is that the schools of magic and the I don't even know what you call them. There's like two sets of classifications. One is like primal or divine. I guess it's the source of the magic, where it's coming from. And then the kind of magic, which is like abjuration, enchantment, blah blah blah, right? And I think that the source is something that makes a lot of sense, because where your magic is coming from matters. right? So it is going to either be, I guess, bloodline, if you're like Dragonborn, like sorcerer stuff, right? Dragonborn, Fae, whatever it is. It is going to be divine, which is a god, essentially, a deity, right? Is imparting magic to you for whatever reason. It is going to be learned, which is the wizard approach. You know, you read a lot of books and it becomes you actually learn how to do it. You are gaining it, you're acquiring it through study. I'm gonna say profane. Let's go with that, which is the flip side of divine, right? That's where you make a deal with the devil, or you swear an oath, or you so like the warlocks, for example, would fall into the profane. So the line, obviously, between divine and profane is a very, very thin line, because where you know, where's the what's the real difference between swearing yourself to a deity and swearing yourself to a creature of the hells? The difference really is only in terms of we think one is okay and the other isn't. But yeah, something along those lines. And then nature is the other one, which is very big in Azurhia because the natural world is extremely imbued with magical qualities. So nature magic would be, you know, the druids and the kind of primal elemental kinds of things. The line between that and bloodline can also be a little bit iffy, because what's the real difference between having your magic come from your ancestral connection to dragons and having your magic come from your current connection to trees? Yeah, right. But something like that. So I'm not sure if that's all the categories we will end up with, but the one thing is the source of your magic, and that's literally where you are, how you are accessing it. And then you have the, I guess, classes. I don't want to use classes because we've done that. What do we want to call it? Categories of magic, which are things like arcane. See, we've already used divine, and this is where it gets complicated, because do we really want it? We don't want to have the same words in the two things, but what's another word for divine? Bloodline. Let's do this. Deity learned. Instead of profane, we will use what's a word for like a more woo-woo word for like contracted. We'll go oath. Okay, so arcane, divine, occult, which is like, you know, necromancy and all that crap. Is necromancy a kind of occult, or is it everything? Anyway, primal, which would include, so I think occult would include necromancy, and primal would include like elemental. What have I left out, folks? What have I left out? So these are very closely tied, or maybe we don't even need these. They're very closely tied to the source stuff. These, maybe instead of doing this, we just do this thing. Enchantment, abjuration, illusion, necromancy would fall into there. So these are the kinds of magic, right? So enchantment, now I'm going to try and remember. Illusion is like making things out of nothing. Abjuration is protection magic. Necromancy is fucking with dead people. I don't remember what enchantment is off the top of my head. I had a really nice little graphic for this somewhere, but I don't know what I've done with it. There is also, I don't remember. Anyway, those things, you know what I mean, right? Which is kind of, so the source is where it comes from. The category is what it does. So when you would, if you are a caster, what you're doing is you're making expertise based on these things. So you wouldn't have expertise in your source necessarily because you don't always know where it comes from, but you would potentially have expertise in particular categories of divine would be one of magic. So if you are a cleric, you would have expertise in divine magic. What that means is that if you're using divine magic, it works better for you. So you would get increased modifiers for the kinds of magic that you have expertise in. That doesn't necessarily mean you can't use the others, but it means that if you have expertise in necromancy and you're doing necromantic spells, you're getting a success modifier to that, or a power modifier, whatever it looks like. Like those spells are going to perform better for you because you understand the way they work better than you understand the others, if that makes sense. So I think we still have primal. Oh, elemental. No, this is what it does. This is what it does. So no. I'm not. This is why I was like awake thinking about this, because I'm like, well, primal magic isn't about what it does, but it is definitely a thing. Like that is tapping into the natural world and drawing from that energy, right? In order to make things happen. I feel like I want elemental to be in there. I don't know. We'll work on this. We'll work on this. Spells are also going to be interesting because you will have to learn them. Not going to have. There will be no preparing of spells in my world because that shit is annoying. You will have particular spells that you learn. Some of them will come to you through this source, right? So if you are a sorcerer style caster who gets your magic because of your Fey ancestry, there will be certain spells that come to you through that ancestry, which will be tied into those catalytic events that we spoke about with the skill trees. Again, clerics are a really easy example, like clerics and paladins, because it's like you do the thing your god has asked you to do. Your god gives you a particular set of spells that you are then able to cast, and those spells would be skinned to that god. So, you know, if your god is Kiefer, who is the god of death, there's going to be a lot of deathy related stuff in that set of spells. So every casting class would have these kinds of things that are kind of built into that catalytic moment where whatever happens, and then your magic is enhanced as a result. However, you can consciously also learn spells as you go along. So you can learn spells from other people who know how to do them. You can learn spells from scrolls. You can learn spells from, in some cases, if you have seen it cast and you've seen what it does and you know enough about the school of magic to attempt to reproduce it, you can make that attempt. It's not going to be crazy easy to do. Obviously, the level of spell will have an impact. So the higher the level of spell, the harder it is to learn. The closer it is to your own innate magic, the easier it is to learn. So if you're a cleric and you're trying to learn a divine spell, it's going to be much easier than if you're trying to learn an abjuration spell, for example. If you're a wizard and your magic is focused on enchantment and you have expertise in enchantment, it's going to be easier for you to learn enchantment spells than it is going to be for you to learn other spells. And what that looks like is it's a DC thing. So there will be I have a version of this written down somewhere already, but there will be essentially a formula that works out the DC of learning the thing, and then you will have a set of modifiers that are based on your current expertise and what you already know and how close you are to that kind of magic. There will also be obviously, a leveling thing. So the higher level caster you are, the easier it is for you to learn higher level spells. Higher level spells are harder to learn than lower level spells, but it allows for a lot more flexibility in terms of what people can do, and it also rewards people who make the effort. It is going to be time consuming, in-world time consuming, and that has a lot to do with the Horde and how it's worked, because if your characters have a lot of downtime and you give them the opportunity to learn stuff, they end up crazy skilled in everything, it turns out. So this would be a good way to spend downtime, but it also is something you can do over time. And again, the higher level the spell, the more time it takes, and the higher the chance of failure. And there are consequences to failure. But I'm not going to get too deep into that right now. For now, I just wanted to kind of touch on it, that the way I'm working magic and casting is going to be very different to the way it's been done in the past, where you just pick a bunch of spells and away you go. This is going to be much more, again, you're going to have to really be conscious of, like, as a player, you will need to be conscious of what it is your character is witnessing, what kinds of things they want to be able to do, and then how you go about learning to do that stuff. So, and everything around the way I've done this is very much built to reward the kinds of players who build characters based on story anyway, because that's just more interesting to me. So yeah, you and because there's no preparation, you would basically have your list of spells that you can do, that you have learned how to do, however you've done it. There's still spell slots, because that makes sense, that there is a limit to how much magic you can perform in a certain amount of time. But yeah, it's designed to reward the kinds of players I like to play with, I guess, is the thing. That people who really invest in their characters and who move through stories with the intent to learn more things are just going to do better and be able to do more things than people who don't do that stuff. It will reward risk. It will reward having the crazy ideas and trying them. It will reward being creative in the use of what you have at hand. I love to be surprised by my players, so a big part of this is making sure that people are rewarded for those things that make for interesting character development and interesting story. That's what I'm going for. I realize this has been an extremely broad, very top level kind of discussion of where I'm at. Over the next however long it takes us, we're going to really break some of this down and dig deep and start building the skill trees and building spell lists and hashing out mechanics of how this is all going to go. But this is the beginning, the very, 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 very start. I'm kind of planning on alternating between world building and game building. So Tuesdays will probably be world building games. So if you come and hang out with me next Tuesday morning, 5 a.m. New Zealand time, I will be here. I will be doing some world building. So if you're interested in Azurhia and its lore, that will be a good time for that. I hope this is fun and interesting for you guys. I feel like me committing to doing this means it's going to happen a lot more regularly, which means that building this thing is actually going to happen, and we can start actually playtesting things and making some stories pretty soon, I hope. Like I said, so much of this is just in my brain, so a big part of this is using you as body doubles to get it out of my brain and into a place where it can actually be used and useful. So that's what we're doing. I am going to just do this so that I can say thank you for hanging with me. I hope that this is interesting to somebody. If not, at the very least, it gives me a way to just work my way through it. Yeah, I will see you twice a week for Under the Hood, and we're going to build a world and a game system at the same time. You and me together. Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, have a beautiful, beautiful time zone, and I will see you soon. Bye bye.
Oh my goodness gracious me. Drug content is everywhere. It's absolutely taking up.